Focus question: how does the brain's pleasure center work? Dr. Stalcup is a national expert on drug abuse and addiction. He's board certified in pediatrics and addiction medicine and is a consultant to the California Justice Department. He's been an expert witness in high-profile court cases and a pioneer in the medical model of addiction. He has helped thousands of people overcome addiction. Dr. Alex Stalcup has a unique understanding of the disease of addiction. Through education and understanding, Dr. Stalcup empowers people to change their lives. In this program, Dr. Stalcup was recorded talking with a group of high school students in Northern California who had been in some trouble because of their drug use. He is explaining the neurological process in the brain that happens in all addictions. Although it was filmed some years ago, many people find these concepts to be valuable in their own decision-making.
My name is Alex. We're going to talk about drugs and alcohol today. We're going to talk especially about tobacco. Here's what I want to do. I want you to understand what a drug is. And all drugs have things in common with every other drug, and that's what makes them a drug. So I want you to know what is common from drug to drug to drug to drug to drug. I want you to understand very clearly the ways that drugs can be harmful to you. I mean, you've grown up hearing the drugs are bad for you. No one ever explained to you why. I want to try and make sure you understand why. Some people who use drugs will be unable to stop using drugs. That's actually a small minority of people. Most people who try drugs can leave them alone. But we know that some people, when they try drugs, continue to use them. They continue to use them even though it's causing them trouble. And when they try and stop, they can't stay stopped or can't stop. You need to understand why that is. You need to understand why it is that some people can get addicted, other people don't, and why those people who get addicted can't stop. Then we're going to spend some time talking about how do you know, or how could you talk to a friend, how could you teach your friends or your parents or somebody else if they could get this. In other words, if it's a disease, we're talking about addiction. After today, I would be really pleased if you could have the ability, if you had learned enough, that you could sit with one of your friends and say, today I learned about addiction is a disease, here's what the disease is, here's how you get it, here's why some people get it and others don't, and here's what you can do if you think you're getting it. And that's really what I want you to be able to do today. This is me, and Newly Treatment Center is where I work. I'm the medical director there, which means that I'm the doctor who sees people with drug and alcohol problems who come in and they're asking for help. We treat tobacco addicts, we treat Oxy, Vicodin, Ativan, heroin, alcohol, methamphetamine. You name a drug, we try and develop a way of helping people get off of them and stay off of them. And that's what we do at the center. All right, let me show you the first slide. This is called the pleasure scale. The pleasure scale. We're not used to thinking of pleasure as a separate concept. But in fact, in each of your brains, there are two parts of your brains that when they're active, and those two brain parts are active, you feel good. They're called your pleasure centers. In a minute, we're going to talk about why you need pleasure centers. But first, you need to know that there are pleasure centers. Now, if you look at the pleasure scale, what this means is that, let's say you've got these parts of your brain that are pleasure centers, and when they're active. So let's say as you sit here right now, you just feel okay. You're not high, you're not low, you're just okay. Now, there are things you can do to turn on your pleasure centers. And these are called natural highs or simple pleasures. They're the kind of things you usually enjoy, the kind of things you like to do. So if you were here and you wanted to feel good, what would you do? Let's say you're bored and you want to do something. You want to feel better. What would you do?
To be truthful, I'll drink or something.
Go drink or something. Okay, and that'll guarantee you to work. How about that? What would you do?
Smoke a cigarette.
Smoke a cigarette. What would you do?
Smoke a bowl.
Smoke a bowl. Okay. So you're in the normal range, and you want to feel better. So you could do stuff to feel good. Now, if you weren't using drugs and alcohol, for example, here, you might just go for a walk or play a video game or watch a movie. So you're normal, but you want to feel better, so say you watch a movie. Now, if I turn your pleasure centers on a little more, in addition to feeling good, you'd start to get interested in things. If you're interested in something, your pleasure centers are active. So let's say you're interested in a good book or hearing what your friend has to say. In order for you to be interested in what your friend is saying, your brain chemistry for pleasure has to activate. And that's how you are allowed to be interested. Your brain chemistry is active and now you're interested. If you wanted to have more pleasure, you could have really good food or really good sex, or you could watch something that was really exciting. Now, the term euphoria means that your pleasure center is full on. It's full active. That's all the pleasure your brain can get. Most people don't get euphoria very often, and it's not something we experience that often. But say you're going to graduate from someplace, or you just got a big award, or you just finished an amazing project. It was really tough. You know that really excited, elated feeling like, wow, that's called euphoria. And it means that your pleasure centers are really turned on and they're giving you a lot of pleasure. With me so far? We also know that your pleasure centers can be underactive. So, for example, if you are in a bad mood, you didn't get any sleep, you feel negative. Any of you ever feel negative? Oh. Now, if you had even less activity in your pleasure centers, you'd be bored. Notice that these are opposites, right? A little activity, you feel good. A little underactivity, you feel negative. Extra activity, you're interested. If it's too low, you're bored. So interest and bored are opposites. Pleasure has as its opposite this term, anhedonia. That means no pleasure. That means your pleasure centers lose the ability to generate a good feeling. And everybody, by the time they're your age, has gone through periods of life where there was no pleasure in your life at all. So you can remember times where it was just flat, boring, empty, just awful. The worst you can feel is the opposite of euphoria. And it's not like sad mood or depression. It's more like a bad mood. It's like, oh, what are you looking at? Don't look at me. I hate it when you look at me. You ever felt like that? That's called dysphoria. It's the opposite of euphoria. So if you've ever been depressed? If you've ever been depressed, you know, because when you're depressed, you can't enjoy anything. So the time most of us have experienced anhedonia, no pleasure, is when we're really depressed. And that's, you can't enjoy yourself when you're depressed. And that's a common time for people to lose pleasure in their life. This is the system drugs work on. Drugs work on this system. Drugs vary in how strong they are. By strong, I mean how much pleasure can they give you. So if you look at this scale, the weakest pleasure stimulator is tobacco. And when you smoke tobacco, you feel good. And if you look at that good feeling, tobacco does more. It actually makes you feel alert, makes you calm, takes away your anxiety, makes your brain sharp. So it does a lot of things, makes you feel good. If you look at weed, it's strong enough to activate your pleasure centers so everything is interesting. You know how when you're high, everything's interesting? The back of your eyelids are interesting, your toenails are interesting, the walls are interesting, everything's interesting. I mean, that's what weed does. It takes things that are not interesting and makes them interesting. So it's strong enough so that if you're high, so for example, you don't like your class, you're hating it, you're just bored out of your tree. You know, if you do a bowl, pretty interesting class. Of course, you might not remember anything, but it was an interesting class at the same time. Alcohol is strong enough to produce pleasure. It's a more powerful drug. And, you know, if you've ever had 2 or 3 shots, it comes on, you go, woo, you giggle and you laugh, you feel good. That's pure pleasure. Now, euphoria is unusual in sober life, but there are some drugs that'll give you euphoria every time you try. Anyone know what I mean? Meth. Meth will always give you euphoria, especially if you smoke it or if you shoot it. OxyContin, all the painkillers can give you amazing euphoria. Cocaine, especially if you smoke it or you shoot it, amazing euphoria. And some people, when they hear me say, wow, drugs give you pleasure, go, you're glorifying drugs. No, we're not. We just need to know what drugs do. And one of the things drugs do is they make you feel really, really good. That's what a drug is. So we're not saying use them to feel good. I just want you to know what drugs are, right? Things make you feel good. So you can actually get euphoria, say if you're a methamphetamine user and you smoke meth. Any of you guys know meth smokers? Any of you meth smoker? I mean, they can get euphoria 20 times a day. You know, they just take a hit off the pipe and boop, la la land, and they're just all over the place with terrific pleasure. Now, if that was what we knew about drugs, you take them into your body, they go into your bloodstream, they get into your brain, they reach the pleasure centers of the brain, they turn on the pleasure centers, and you get high. You get pleasure. High and pleasure mean the same thing. Now, if that's what we knew about drugs, why wouldn't we just stop and go get high? I mean, here's all this pleasure, why don't we just go get high? Why don't we just go get high? I mean, think of it. 20 times a day, you can have maximum pleasure go off in your head. Boom, fireworks.
Because at the same time, it's ruining your life. So.
Why don't we just go get high? Not a bad answer, Javier.
Because it's just bad for you, and it
Why?
breaks everything down, and before you know it, everything that you have is gone. And
Good
it
answer.
hurts your family and stuff.
Why don't we just go get high?
What happens when you have nothing else to get high on than much?
Good answer. Y'all know people who use powerful drugs, right? The big ones, the euphoric ones. Are they dancing in the aisles and having a great time? What's wrong? No money, no home, plenty of pleasure, right? So you're all on the right track. I mean, obviously. If drugs were a free ride, we would just go get high. But we all know it's not a free ride. And one of the things that I think it's important to understand is, why are they bad for you? Why are they bad for you? If you look at this slide, I'll give you the answer why they're bad for you. Let's say you're using weed, or let's say you're using alcohol. You're using it. Eventually, you'll reach a point where the amount you're using doesn't get as high as it used to. Have you seen that happen? Have you reached that point yet? Where it takes more to get high than it used to? Have you seen that? So one of the problems with using drugs is the amount you used to use stops working and you need to use more. Now, if you reach that point and stop, you don't go back to normal. The thing to realize about drugs is once you've reached the point where you don't get as high as you used to and now you stop, the way you feel when you're not high is no longer the way you used to feel when you're not high. Here's the rule. You go as low as you got high. You go as low as you got high. So, for example, if you look at tobacco smokers, you guys are experts on this, you feel good when you smoke. But when you stop smoking, you don't go back to normal. You feel negative instead of positive, right? If you're a weed smoker and you use it and you like weed, when you stop, you don't go back to normal. What do you get?
Bored.
Bored. You've all experienced this. You all know what I'm talking about. If you drink alcohol and you reach the point where the alcohol you used to use doesn't work anymore, you stop. You can't enjoy yourself. You lose pleasure. What are you going to do?
Drink.
Drink. That's the right answer. Okay. Now, if you're using drugs that produce euphoria, when you stop, keep in mind this fact. Dysphoria isn't tolerable. Nobody can stand being dysphoric. You've seen people coming down from meth. They're awful. They can't stand how they feel. They're out of their accord. And that's dysphoria. So they pay a really high price for the euphoria they got. Now, one of the things if you talk with a meth user, they love the high. But when they stop using, whoa, they go to the opposite of high. What do they want to do then? They're desperate to use. They're frantic to use, right? You've seen that? They're just going crazy to use because nobody can take this. Nobody can stand this. So, go a little further. Stand back. And the question I would ask you, why do we have pleasure in our brains? If say you get a good massage, or suppose you are just really in love, or suppose you're thinking about graduation or something, the pleasure you get from that means that your pleasure center's turned on. If you're interested in something, or how valuable, how important things are. In other words, if you stand back, the pleasure centers are active in all the different things we do. They're really active in the things that make it possible for us to live. That's the system drugs work on. Drugs turn on it and do all these things.